Elite Facts presents
10 hardest video games ever.
10.
Demon's Souls. When it comes to difficult video games, the one thing people think about these days is any one of the installments of the Souls franchise that belongs to From Software. Now, we'll only be choosing one game because if we choose multiple games from this series, it would take up nearly half the list. So we'll go with the very first game in the series, Demon's Souls. Now, technically, it is its own IP, but you can easily count it as part of the Dark Souls series for the simple reason that they both aesthetically look similar. They play the same, and they're all incredibly difficult. And hey, the developers are actually really proud of this. Demon's Souls found itself somewhat praised for its difficulty level, presumably because it offers a genuine challenge to avid gamers who have been playing games that are more story-focused, rather than how challenging the gameplay has been for the last decade. Demon's Souls just took no prisoners and shocked everyone as a result. Now, what makes it so difficult? Well, the controls themselves are pretty much perfect. It's literally how the game treats the player, as the game gives you very limited health items, insane boss fights, and very few checkpoints. Sure, as a player, you'll find yourself getting more and more annoyed as you keep playing the game and keep dying, but by the time you've completed it, you end up feeling like you've accomplished something incredible.
9.
Ghosts and Goblins NES. Oh boy, now if you want difficulty, look no further. At first glance, you may have thought, what a cute little name and cartoony art design. I'll just buy this for little Jimmy to enjoy. Well, little Jimmy probably didn't enjoy it, because the game was ridiculously difficult. This platformer sends you on a knight's quest to rescue a princess, which sounds pretty simple as a premise, right? Well, as you move through various levels, the game's enemies, presumably programmed by the devil himself, will swoop in at impossible angles to damage you. 2 hits and it's back to the start. The game also decided to embrace real-world physics, which meant that jumping became landing and being killed. So it's only 2 hits and you go back to square one. You can't jump for heights or you'll die. What else can the game throw at you? Oh, yeah, well, how about having to go through the game twice in order to get the true ending? Yeah, as if it wasn't hard enough, completing the game will prompt it to restart at a harder difficulty before you can truly complete it. Why? Because everything you just did was an illusion. Yeah, sure, whatever. 6 levels would have been just fine without forcing us to replay them.
8.
God Hand. God Hand was actually a tragic story. This game was pretty damn cool as it mixed Wild West themes with hand-to-hand martial arts combat. Like we said, the gameplay itself was pretty cool and the story was crazy, but it's the type of crazy that grabs the player's attention. Unfortunately, it was a commercial failure, and that meant that many of the best ideas were bound to be stolen, one being the on-screen difficulty meter that responds to a player's skill. Now, you're probably asking, how is that difficult? Well, there were 4 gradations, from level 1 to level die, and if you couldn't tell, level die was obviously the hardest of them all. The way this system worked was that if you're playing the game badly, or are just struggling to get a grasp of the controls and combat, you would remain on level 1. As you progressed and got better, the difficulty would gradually get turned up and up until the difficulty either wrecked you or you got good enough to deal with the game's difficult enemies. Few games made the demands that God Hand did, and none tied difficulty and performance together with such elegance.
7.
Silver Surfer NES. This game is just brutally unfair. Silver Surfer on the NES is one of those games people love to hate, and it's often used as an example of bad game design. Once again, it is another game that had tight controls and graphically looked nice, but it was the enemies that ruined it. The vertical sections were particularly tricky due to the size of the surfer's board. In this game, it's a one-hit, game-over situation, meaning that either the player must be hit by an enemy for the game to be over, or the player must hit a part of the level's design for the game to be over. Trust us, it was terrible. That being said, even with this kind of challenge, the game was beatable. It just required some extreme skill to better the various levels and take down the bosses, something only the best players of the game had managed to do.
6.
Battletoads. All we need to say is this: turbo freaking tunnels. So Battletoads is difficult for 2 different reasons. The first one being the turbo tunnel. This part of the game is just brutal, as the player must drive a jet ski through a tunnel at a ridiculous speed while dodging oncoming obstacles and hitting jumps just right. Now, you'd think that by adding a second player, it would increase your chances at beating this stage, right? Wrong. Having a second player makes the whole game, not just the turbo tunnel section, but the whole game more difficult for two reasons. First reason being that you can hit your partner, making it much more risky during beat-em-up sections. The second reason is the fact that when either player's 3 lives are up, the game is over. It doesn't matter if you still have 3 lives. If your partner dies, it's game over for the both of you. You'll probably end up in a brawl with them by the time you complete this game.
5,
Contra NES. Developed by Konami, Contra was considered by many to be one of the most difficult games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, next to Ninja Gaiden, Ghosts and Goblins, and the Castlevania trilogy, which was also developed by Konami. This game was so difficult that it ended up spawning the original incarnation of the Konami, the most famous cheat code of all time. The code gave the player 30 lives, as opposed to the original 3 lives the game gives you. The game itself arms the player with an array of weapons, and they're given the task of taking on an alien force across several missions, including side-scrolling, platform shooting sections, and pseudo 3D shooting galleries. Waves of enemies constantly assault the players, as well as some fearsome bosses. Through all of this, you had 3 lives with 1-hit kills to beat the game. You can pretty much see why the Konami code was invented now, can't you?
4,
Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse, NES. It should be said that none of the original NES Castlevania titles are easy. The first game in the series is incredibly difficult, what with the final boss, and Castlevania II: Simon's Quest is difficult due to how cryptic it is, as well as how tedious the day-to-night transition can be. But Castlevania III's brutality is what makes it worth a special mention, because much of it was manufactured for the US version of the game. Enemies are much more challenging in the game because they hit much harder, and the US version saw Ghost character Grant have his throwing dagger nerfed to be a lot weaker than the Japanese counterpart, where the attack was much more effective. Worst of all, if you die in your fight against one of Dracula's 3 forms, you will have to go through the entire final stage all over again. Now, surely the Japanese version has to be the same with this, right? Wrong. If you die in the Japanese version, you will graciously respawn at the bottom of the stairs right outside the boss room. Finding this out years later must have sent the 1980s kids in the US into fits, that's for sure.
3,
Stuntman PS2. So just to add a bit of variety to the list, we decided to add Stuntman on PS2. This game is a whole lot of fun. The issue here, however, is that the game is a memory game. You have to be absolutely perfect when playing through a level. The requirements to complete a level include having to drive through a stage and complete obstacles within a time limit. This time limit cuts everything you do close, meaning you must be perfect, which is no easy task, as these obstacles can range from things like stunt jumping through the open doors of a train, dodging traffic in a tight tunnel with large vehicles blocking and obscuring your path, to smashing your way through barns and kiosk stands just to make the time limit. This game is incredibly fun, but incredibly difficult at the very same time.
2,
Devil May Cry 3: Dante's Awakening, PS2. So coming off of the lukewarm reception that Devil May Cry 2 received, Capcom decided to go back to Dante's roots for the third game in this series, with the story showing how the demon hunter became the badass that he is today. Oh wait, never mind. However, with this they decided to rack up the difficulty. What was originally the hard mode in Japan was instead made the normal mode for Western audiences, making everyone cry at later levels in the game due to how difficult they were. It was so difficult, in fact, that Capcom had to release a special edition that balanced the difficulty. Now the game is pretty much perfect.
1,
Ninja Gaiden Black. To be fair, you can pretty much put any Ninja Gaiden on this list, and the reason for it would be justified. However, Ninja Gaiden Black is the perfect choice for this list, as it takes what made the original NES game hard and cranks it up to 11. This time around, you're playing in a 3D playing field, much like Devil May Cry, while keeping the difficulty and challenge the original NES trilogy had to offer. That meant that the action was fast-paced. Enemies were quick, fast, and tough, and most of all, you were required to learn the controls to a T, as you would be required to use certain abilities throughout the game. This wasn't a game where you could just ignore the block button. The game was the literal definition of get good or get out.
Don't forget to like us and subscribe for more Elite Facts.